Imagine for a moment that everything you consider real, your history, your memories, your certainties, is merely a fragment of something much greater. Imagine there is a silent point within you, a space of pure consciousness, where all the answers rest, awaiting the moment to be remembered. It is from this place that Dolores Cannon begins to speak. Her voice does not come from outside, but echoes from within, like an ancient whisper traversing layers of time. She does not teach, she awakens. And upon hearing her, every cell seems to recognize something familiar, as if returning home after a long journey. Dolores always said that the soul is a cosmic traveler, moving through dimensions and bodies, learning through experience. The body is merely the vehicle, time is merely the setting, and Earth a carefully designed school for remembrance. But how many of us truly remember? How many recognize the signs left in the subtext of life? Coincidences that are not coincidences, people who seem to have known each other forever, places that awaken an inexplicable longing. For her, none of this was chance. Each instant is a code, and each encounter, an opportunity for realignment with the purpose the spirit outlined before incarnating. It's curious to think that we come into this world knowing who we are, but soon forget. Forgetting is part of the plan. It allows us to fully experience the illusion of separation, to feel the weight of doubt and the impulse to search. Without it, there would be no learning, no choice, no evolution. The soul, upon plunging into the density of matter, accepts the challenge of duality, light and shadow, joy and pain, birth and death. Dolores discovered, while guiding thousands of people in deep regressions, that behind every pain there was a hidden purpose, and behind every loss, an expansion. Souls, she said, are architects of their own destiny. They construct experiences to know themselves in every possible way. As each life is lived, fragments of wisdom accumulate like luminous threads in an invisible web. And when we finally allow ourselves to silence the mind and listen to what vibrates beneath the thoughts, we begin to perceive this web. Dolores called it the greater plan, a quantum network of information where everything and everyone is connected. At this level, past, present, and future are not lines but points coexisting. You are not the result of your past lives. You are all of them, existing now, simultaneously, in multiple frequencies. Every emotion you feel, every decision you make, reverberates through these layers, altering the entire whole. That is why, according to her, there is no punishment, only cause and effect. There is no fixed destiny, only choices that chart paths. If you are reading or listening to these words, it is not by chance. Perhaps something within you has asked to be remembered. Perhaps you have felt the silent call of the soul asking to be recognized again. Dolores said that the moment of awakening arrives like a wave, sometimes gentle as a breeze, sometimes devastating as a storm, but always transformative. When it comes, there is no turning back. The mind tries to resist, rationalize, doubt, but the heart knows. It always knew. At this point in the journey, fear often arises. Fear of losing control, fear of the unknown, fear of discovering that the self we believed ourselves to be is only a part of something much vaster. Dolores didn't see fear as an enemy, but as a guardian of the portal. It prevents us from moving forward before we are ready, but it also challenges us to cross it when the time comes. Fear is just misinterpreted energy, she said. When we observe it with love, it dissolves and transforms into wisdom. It is in this dissolution that consciousness begins to expand, allowing us to see beyond the boundaries of logic and time. The first portal of remembrance opens at that moment, when we recognize that life doesn't just happen with us, but through of us. Each breath is a creative act. Each thought is a seed sown in the quantum field of being. Dolores affirmed that we are co-authors of the universe, collaborators of an infinite consciousness that experiences itself through each of us. When we understand this, even for a brief moment, something changes. The world seems the same, but the perspective becomes different. What once seemed chaotic begins to reveal a subtle order, and chance transforms into language. But there's one detail she always emphasized. Remembering isn't an intellectual process, it's vibrational. It's not about accumulating spiritual information, but about resonating with it. Truth doesn't need to be learned, only recognized. That's why she insisted that each person possesses all the answers within themselves, even those they don't yet know how to formulate. I only guide people into themselves, Dolores would say serenely. And it was there, in the silence between breaths, that many discovered entire universes, forgotten lives, soul pacts, interrupted purposes, and reunions awaited for millennia. Awakening, therefore, is not a future event. It is already happening now, at this very moment when you feel the vibration of these words. The question is, are you truly listening? Are you ready to cross the first portal and remember who you have always been? Dolores Cannon does not appear as a distant figure from the past, but as a living presence, floating between dimensions, lighting small lights in the labyrinth of the human mind. She invites us to remember what forgetfulness has erased, to trust what the heart whispers, to look at the invisible with inner eyes. And this is where the journey begins, at the exact point where doubt meets intuition, where fear bows before curiosity, where the soul, tired of hiding, begins to awaken. Something within you senses that there is more, much more, than you have been told. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is not the first time you have heard Dolores's voice. Perhaps it has always been there, waiting for the right moment to remind you of an ancient truth, whispered through the ages. You're not learning anything new, just remembering. Sometimes awakening begins imperceptibly, a dream that seems more real than wakefulness, a déjà vu that insists on repeating itself, a sudden feeling that we have already been in a certain place, already said those words, already looked at that face in another life. Dolores Cannon said that these moments are not coincidences, but gaps, cracks in the illusion of linear time. It is when the soul whispers, "Look closer." It is at that instant that the ordinary dissolves, and reality reveals its folds. You continue living your routine, go to work, talk to friends, meet deadlines, but there is something in the air, a different vibration, as if a veil were about to lift. Dolores used to tell stories of ordinary people who, in a seemingly simple session, traversed centuries of existence. A businessman who, while lying down for regression, saw himself as a Tibetan monk, guarding manuscripts in a cave. A young mother who discovered she had lived as a healer in an ancient village, fearing being burned for speaking with plants. A skeptical engineer who, upon hearing his own voice during the trance, wept as he recognized the memory of a life on another planet, where communication happened through light and color, not words. The astonishment was always accompanied by a profound relief, as if a missing piece had finally fallen into place. "Now everything makes sense," they would say through tears. And in some mysterious way, it does. For Dolores, regression was not a spectacle of past lives, but a tool for integration. Each recovered memory was a fragment returning to the whole. She said that the pains we carry, the inexplicable phobias, the blockages, the repetitions of destiny, are echoes of stories that continue to vibrate within us, demanding resolution. How many times have you felt fear for no reason, or always attracted the same type of person, the same mismatch, the same loss? Perhaps they are not punishments, but unfinished scripts. When these memories emerge into consciousness, they do not come to punish us, but to liberate us. Dolores used to ask, what if everything you call a problem is just a memory trying to heal? This question resonates with those who have felt displaced, as if they don't fully belong in this world. It's the feeling of being here, but remembering another place that one can't name, a longing for home that isn't physical, but vibrational. Many call this spiritual melancholy, but Dolores saw in it the sign of those who came with a mission. She called them waves of volunteers, souls who accepted reincarnation on Earth at this time of transition to help raise the planet's frequency. They don't remember where they came from, but they feel an incessant calling to heal, understand, serve, and transform. These volunteers, she said, are the artists who create beauty even in pain, the scientists who intuit solutions before formulas, the teachers who teach more with their gaze than with content. They are extremely sensitive people who often feel exhausted, displaced, strange in the midst of a world that seems too heavy. Dolores saw in them the silent messengers of a new consciousness, and perhaps upon hearing this, something within you will recognize itself. Perhaps you have already felt the loneliness of someone who knows there is something more, but cannot find anyone who understands. Perhaps you have already cried without knowing why, simply because you felt that the world has forgotten what is sacred. She used to say that forgetting isn't a flaw, it's protection. Carrying all the memories of all lives would be unbearable. Therefore the veil exists, so that we can experience life fully, without the burden of the past. But when the time comes, memories open like windows. Sometimes in a dream, sometimes in a random conversation, sometimes in the gaze of a stranger that awakens an old emotion. Time then ceases to be a line and becomes a mirror. Everything is happening now, the past asking for reconciliation, the future awaiting a decision, the present stitching both together, and there comes a point where reason surrenders. No logical explanation is sufficient, because what is being touched is deeper than the mind. It is the soul recognizing itself through human experience. Dolores affirmed that when a memory returns, it brings with it a lesson that transcends time. The monk who silently copied scriptures is now the writer who seeks to inspire. The feared healer is reborn as a doctor or therapist. The warrior of yesteryear becomes a peacemaker. Nothing is lost. Everything evolves. Identities transform, but the essence remains. Even so, the memory can hurt. It's like waking from a dream and realizing that the body still carries the marks of what seemed imaginary. Many left the sessions confused, crying, laughing, relieved. Dolores would just smile and say, "You've just found yourself," because that's what happened. It wasn't about traveling to the past, but about bringing the past into the present and reconciling with it. Forgiveness in this process was not a moral act, but energetic alchemy. When we forgive, we don't free the other person. We free ourselves from the frequencies that bind us to suffering. At the end of the sessions, Dolores used to say that each soul is a book being written in multiple simultaneous chapters. Some are open, others still sealed. And that awakening is, in fact, the moment when we realize that we are both the author and the character at the same time. This realization changes everything. It's when responsibility transforms into power and chance into choice. It's when we stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What does this want to teach me?" At that instant, the thread of destiny is illuminated, and chaos reveals its sacred geometry. And so, the journey continues. Life, once seen as a random sequence of events, becomes a living tapestry of meaning. You realize that nothing is out of place, that even mistakes were part of the learning process. Dolores said that it is at this point that the second portal opens, that of reconciliation with the past. But the journey is never linear. It comes accompanied by signs, synchronicities, strange coincidences that accumulate until they can no longer be ignored. And it is at this point that the mystery deepens. Because when the soul begins to remember, the entire universe seems to move to help it continue. And something within you, even without understanding, knows that the path is only beginning. There comes a point in the journey when awakening ceases to be an internal process and begins to reflect in the world around us. Everything seems the same: the streets, the work, the voices, the commitments. But something has irreversibly changed. It's as if the air has gained density, as if the invisible has become perceptible. Dolores Cannon said that it is at this point that the quantum field begins to respond. Coincidences accelerate, the right people appear. Signs repeat themselves until there is no longer any way to deny that something greater is underway. Life, previously seemingly random, begins to act as an intelligent mirror, returning to consciousness exactly what it emits. It's not magic, it's subtle physics. Dolores used to say that every thought is a frequency, and every emotion, an energetic signature that propagates beyond matter. When a person awakens, their vibrational field changes, and with it, the reality that surrounds them also changes. Situations that once seemed inevitable begin to dissolve, and new possibilities emerge like invisible portals. It's not about attracting what you want, but about tuning into what you are. The universe doesn't respond to requests, it responds to states of being, she would say. And that simple, direct phrase was a watershed moment, because true power lies not in controlling the world, but in harmonizing with it. But then the question arises: if we create our own reality, why do tragedies, injustices, and illnesses still exist? Why do so many souls suffer if consciousness is a co-author of the universe? Dolores never promised comfortable answers. She explained that Earth is a stage for collective learning, a laboratory of evolution where higher laws balance individual free will with shared experience. What we call pain is often a turning point, a choice made on another plane to catalyze growth. No one is a victim of fate, she said. We are all participants in a plan so vast that the human mind cannot yet comprehend it. Can we accept this idea without resorting to guilt or denial? She once recounted the case of a woman who wept upon discovering that her incurable illness was, in fact, a spiritual agreement, a mission to awaken compassion in those around her. The revelation didn't cure her body, but it liberated her soul. Dolores explained that true healing rarely begins in the flesh. It happens first in consciousness, and the body merely responds. This is why some people change completely after a near-death experience or a profound encounter. The energy system realigns with its original purpose, and life resumes the course that had been forgotten. How many times, however, do we resist change for fear of losing what we know? How many times do we confuse stability with security and remain trapped in cycles that have already served their purpose? Dolores said that when the soul ignores subtle signs, the universe begins to speak louder. First comes mild discomfort, then crisis, until finally chaos forces transformation. And chaos, contrary to appearances, is the language of the soul when it needs to be heard. It is the moment when everything false crumbles so that the true can emerge. Sometimes it's the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, bankruptcy, illness, grief. The form doesn't matter. The goal is always the same, to realign the being with what it truly is. Is it possible to look at chaos not as punishment, but as a call to the next level of consciousness? In her research, Dolores began to realize that there is an intelligence orchestrating these movements. She called it source consciousness, a unified field where all experiences are connected. When a soul raises its vibration, this field expands. When a soul gets lost in pain, the field also contracts. Thus, each act of forgiveness, each gesture of love, alters not only the individual but the energetic structure of all humanity. It is a living, pulsating web, constantly reorganizing itself. And when we understand this, we begin to perceive the weight and beauty of each choice. After all, what are we feeding? Expansion or fear? Expansion, she said, is not an ascending line but a spiral. Each turn brings back old themes under a new perspective until we learn to respond differently. The soul does not rush. It refines itself. It is in this refinement that intuitive gifts, synchronicities, and vivid dreams are born. Dolores believed that intuition is the purest language of the soul, and that by learning to listen to it, we stop living by logic and begin to live by inner coherence. Truth doesn't shout, it vibrates, she said. But how many times do we silence this vibration in the name of reason, haste, the need to control? How many answers do we ignore for fear of seeming foolish? Over time, she began to notice a pattern among the people who were awakening. They all felt a calling, an almost physical impulse to change their lives. Some abandoned secure careers to follow uncertain paths. Others distanced themselves from environments that no longer resonated. It was as if an invisible force was guiding them, and the more they resisted, the more intense the feeling of disconnection became. Dolores saw in this evidence that the Earth was going through a cycle of collective transition, a vibrational leap that was forcing souls to reposition themselves. And she knew that the discomfort was only the prelude to transformation. But what happens when individual awakening becomes collective? When thousands of people begin to question the same structures, to feel the same silent calling, to see the same flaws in the old world? Dolores said that this is the tipping point, the moment when reality bends to make way for a new frequency. When enough souls remember, the planet itself reconfigures itself, she stated serenely. Perhaps we are living through this moment now, and not everyone is prepared to see what comes next. It is at this threshold that the third portal opens, that of cosmic connections. The moment when humankind understands that it has never been alone, that it is part of an interdimensional network of consciousnesses cooperating for the evolution of all worlds. Dolores said that some of these beings already walk among us, disguised as ordinary people, and that others observe us from afar, sending waves of information and support. It sounds like fiction, but what if it isn't? What if what we call intuition is the echo of these subtle communications, guiding us back home? The mystery deepens, and the mind hesitates, but the heart recognizes. It always recognizes. And that's where the story changes, because what once seemed impossible begins to seem inevitable. Dolores Cannon used to say that when human consciousness expands enough to see beyond the boundaries of Earth, something extraordinary happens. The fear of the unknown transforms into recognition. She asserted that the entire universe is intertwined by a living intelligence, and that humanity has never been merely an observer, but part of a vast cosmic community. This assertion, which to many sounds like mystical delusion, was supported by thousands of regression reports in which people, without any prior contact with each other, described identical worlds, similar civilizations, and interconnected missions. Dolores did not see these coincidences as proof of collective fantasy, but as a reminder of a common origin. The cosmos, according to her, is an infinite school, and Earth is just one of its classrooms. In her sessions, stories emerged that defied all logic. One woman recalled a life on a planet covered in oceans of liquid crystal, where communication occurred through sound waves that shaped light. A man described civilizations living in underground colonies after cosmic catastrophes, protecting seeds of species extinct for millennia. Another narrated the work of beings of pure energy who assisted planets in vibrational transition, dissolving densities with harmonic frequency. None of them knew the others, and yet the details coincided. Dolores meticulously recorded everything, observing that, despite cultural differences, the narratives converged on the same truth. Earth was preparing for an unprecedented dimensional shift. Many laughed at these stories, calling them fertile imaginations. But Dolores insisted that imagination is merely the language of the soul before it is filtered by the mind. She said that the laughter of skeptics didn't bother her, because she knew that sooner or later, everyone would be confronted with something that would break logic. She herself had gone through this when, applying hypnosis techniques for therapeutic purposes, she began to hear patients describe realities that transcended the human body. At first, she doubted herself, but the information that came from these consciousnesses, which presented themselves as guides, spiritual advice, or superior intelligences, brought knowledge she could never have invented. Information about quantum physics, energy medicine, and the multidimensional structure of the universe was confirmed years later by scientific research. Coincidence? Dolores never believed in coincidences. She asserted that humanity lives a paradox. It desires proof, but ignores the signs. While telescopes search for distant civilizations, many refuse to see the closest evidence, that we are part of the same vibrational fabric that composes the stars. Dolores reported that some of her patients remembered existences as explorers of newly created worlds, as cosmic engineers helping to seed life on young planets. She said that these memories are like fragments that are emerging now, because the time of separation is ending. The veil between dimensions, which once kept humanity isolated, is thinning. What seemed impossible decades ago is beginning to be glimpsed through modern physics and near-death experiences, visions, lucid dreams, and even scientific discoveries about consciousness as a creative factor. But there's something even more fascinating. Dolores believed that many of the souls walking the Earth today came from other stars, volunteers who accepted the mission of assisting the planet in its transition. These are the so-called volunteer waves, 3 distinct generations of souls with different levels of sensitivity and purpose. The first came to anchor the energy of awakening, bearing the weight of fear and misunderstanding. The second came to break down systems and question everything that seemed immutable. And the third, formed by free-spirited and intuitive young people, was born already aligned with the new frequency of Earth, bringing a wisdom that cannot be explained, only recognized. Many of them reject rigid structures, don't fit into traditional models, and seem to carry a silent memory of another home. Is it a coincidence that so many children today speak of stars, vibrations, and energies with disconcerting naturalness? Dolores used to say that these souls aren't special, they're necessary. They function like antennas, transducers of the new vibration that is reshaping the planetary energy field. That's why so many feel tired, displaced, exhausted for no apparent reason. It's not illness, it's attunement. The human body, still trapped in an old density, tries to adjust to a new frequency that demands lightness, empathy, and authenticity. That's why everything that isn't true begins to crumble. Relationships, jobs, beliefs. Nothing resists the vibration of truth. It's painful but inevitable. And Dolores always said, don't fight the collapse. It's not the end. It's the beginning of reconstruction. Indeed, a patient described seeing Earth from afar, enveloped in a pulsating blue light, surrounded by hundreds of consciousnesses observing with tenderness and expectation. She said she felt the planet breathe, like a living being in metamorphosis. When she returned from the trance, she cried, but not from fear, from recognition. "I was there," she said, "before I was born." Dolores believed that many of us feel the same, albeit unconsciously. The sense of urgency, of mission, of not completely belonging comes from this hidden memory. We were among those who decided to come, and we came because we knew that Earth, amidst its darkness, held the spark of a new beginning. Today, each of us is called to remember the silent commitment made before our arrival, the promise to keep the light burning even when all seemed lost. Dolores used to say that the planet doesn't need saviors, but beings conscious of who they are. "The Earth's frequency changes when you change," she would repeat, and perhaps the secret to all this mystery lies there. The universe doesn't transform from the outside in, but from the inside out. When a consciousness awakens, it illuminates everything around it, and that's how the transition is fulfilled. But before dawn, there is always one last shadow. Dolores knew that the darkest point of the night is the one that precedes the ultimate expansion. And it is on this threshold that the fourth portal opens, that of the mission of willing souls. The moment when the individual stops asking, "Why am I here?" and begins to act as one who knows. The instant when fear is silenced and memory speaks. The instant when Dolores's voice seems to traverse time to whisper, with the calm of one who has already seen the future, "You came for this, and what is to come will be magnificent." Dolores Cannon believed that humanity was approaching a turning point, a cosmic instant she called the Great Separation of Frequencies. It wouldn't be a physical event, but a vibrational shift so intense it would divide realities. She described it as two worlds coexisting in the same space, one trapped in fear and density, the other guided by compassion and expanded consciousness, both visible for a time, until the Earth's own energy field defined the tuning of each soul. It was a silent, gradual, but inevitable process, the planet choosing its new tone, and each person, consciously or not, participating in the orchestra that shapes the future. She recounted that many were already feeling this change in their bodies, an inexplicable pressure, insomnia, palpitations, anxiety without apparent cause. According to Dolores, the human body was the first to react to the vibrational elevation of the planet. The symptoms weren't illnesses but adjustments, DNA beginning to awaken regions dormant for millennia. She said that scientists would one day confirm that within each cell there are cosmic memories, as if the universe had left secret instructions imprinted in the human genetic code. The awakening, therefore, wouldn't happen outside, but inside. "Don't expect lights in the sky," she said. "Look inside. The portal is within you." But the transformation would not come without resistance. The more the light increases, the more the shadows move. Dolores believed that the periods of social chaos, economic collapses, and collective crises that the world experiences are not punishments, but symptoms of transition. "Everything that is false needs to fall," she repeated. She said that the Earth could no longer support structures based on fear, control, or greed. Therefore, old systems would crumble, governments would lose power, and previously unquestionable institutions would be exposed. What seemed like tragedy would, in fact, be the harbinger of a new equilibrium. But humanity, accustomed to reacting with panic, would interpret this purification as destruction. Dolores smiled serenely when speaking of this. The house needs to be cleaned before it can be illuminated. Some of the accounts she received during regressions seemed to confirm this scenario. People saw scenes of cities covered in golden mists, where communication was done through thought. Others described the Earth as a living organism in recovery, vibrating in intense shades of blue and green. And, in contrast, there were the dark visions, civilizations that disappeared for resisting change, planets that shattered due to their own emotional density. Dolores said that these memories came as both warning and inspiration. Destiny was not written, but the choice had to be made. Each soul would have to decide which frequency it wished to sustain. "There will be no judgment," she affirmed, "only resonance." What if all this wasn't a metaphor? What if we were really on the verge of this energetic bifurcation? Dolores insisted that the change wouldn't be visible like a cataclysm, but felt as an internal displacement. Close people might suddenly seem distant, as if vibrating at different rhythms. Relationships would naturally dissolve. Paths that were once safe would cease to make sense. And time, she said, would begin to behave strangely, accelerating. decelerating, bending according to the consciousness of the one who perceives it. And it's true that many report this sensation. The days seem too short, memories become mixed, the present repeats itself. Perhaps time is really changing, or perhaps we are just beginning to remember that it was never linear. Dolores saw this as a collective test. Fear, judgment, anger, everything would be amplified not to punish, but to clearly show what needs healing. Every thought would have more power. Every intention would become almost immediate. That's why she warned, what you feel and think now creates what you will experience later. It was a call to vibrational responsibility, to full awareness of what one emits into the universe. The future would cease to be a consequence and would become a choice. The law of cause and effect would become instantaneous. For some, this would be liberating. For others, unbearable. Amidst all this, an inevitable question arose. What if humanity fails? What if fear is stronger than memory? Dolores answered with a disconcerting serenity. The plan cannot fail. It simply repeats itself until it is learned. She said that the universe is patient, that time is merely a tool, and that no soul is left behind. Even those who choose to remain in density will have new opportunities, new worlds to continue their journey. Nothing is lost, she repeated, not even the mistake. These words echoed with the force of a balm in times of uncertainty. However, she knew that the threshold of transition would bring a turning point. There will be a moment, she said, when many will feel there is no ground left. It will be the moment to let go of control and trust. For her, this would be the true test of faith, not in a religion, but in the wisdom of one's own soul. Dolores believed that when humanity reached this collective surrender, the planet would vibrate at a frequency capable of dissolving the boundaries between dimensions. Death would cease to be a mystery. Time would cease to be a prison. Love, once an abstract concept, would become a physical force, visible, almost palpable. And perhaps this is the moment we are in now, the threshold between the old and the new, between remembrance and forgetting. Everything seems uncertain. Systems collapse, truths fragment, and yet something within us remains serene, as if it knew this is the purpose. Dolores Cannon said that chaos is the last gasp of the old earth, and that on the other side awaits a world where fear no longer governs. The fifth portal opens at this instant, that of planetary transition. And as we cross it, we understand that the apocalypse is not the end, but the revelation, the removal of the veil. The question that echoes is simple and definitive. Will you remember when the veil falls? Because when it falls, there will be no turning back. Perhaps Dolores Cannon's greatest teaching wasn't about dimensions, past lives, or lost civilizations, but about the simple act of remembering that we are creators, that each thought is a seed planted in the infinite field of existence, and that, when we consciously choose what to sow, we begin to shape reality. The planetary transition she so vividly described is not merely cosmic, it's intimate. It begins the instant we decide to act consciously, speak with compassion, listen with presence. The new world doesn't emerge from the outside in, but from the inside out. From each small gesture that carries the vibration of love. That's where transformation becomes practical, tangible, alive. Dolores said that awakening is not about escaping Earth, but about inhabiting it with an awakened soul. It's about being present in every choice, seeing the divine in simple things, transforming the everyday into a ritual of consciousness. When you observe the world with this perspective, the traffic, the conversations, the noises, everything becomes part of a larger orchestra. Life ceases to be a succession of obligations and becomes a dance between planes, the physical and the spiritual, the visible and the invisible. The secret, according to her, is learning to sustain this vibration even amidst chaos. It's not about denying pain, but about traversing it with wisdom. It's about remembering that each challenge is a question from the soul, asking for an answer in the form of expansion. Perhaps the world won't change all at once, but you can change it now. A thought of gratitude interrupts the cycle of fear. A gesture of empathy alters the frequency of an environment. A choice made with love has quantum power. Dolores said that when one person awakens, hundreds around them feel the effect, even without realizing it. This is how the new earth is built, from consciousness to consciousness, from heart to heart. And if you feel this calling, if something within you vibrates while listening to these words, It's because you are already part of this construction. You are one of the bridges between worlds. She used to say that there are no masters in the old sense of the word. We are all learners and instructors at the same time. Each of us carries a piece of the puzzle, and the moment we share what we know is the moment we help others remember as well. You don't need to change everything at once. Start where you are. Observe your thoughts, your reactions, your intentions. Realize that awareness is not an idea. It's a practice, and every practice begins with a first step. Upon waking, before looking at your phone, breathe and ask yourself, what am I creating today with what I'm vibrating now? This simple question is key. Dolores believed that each soul, upon awakening, sends out a wave of light that spreads beyond comprehension, and that by remembering, you not only heal your history, but realign an entire segment of humanity. That is the true mission, not to save the world, but to become a point of balance within it. When you vibrate in peace, that peace expands. When you choose love, that love replicates itself. It's the domino effect of consciousness. The universe responds to coherence, and the more people choose to act from it, the smoother the Earth's transition will be. The future is not written, but it is being felt now by each of us. Look at your life honestly. Is there something that needs healing, forgiveness, closure? Is there a fear that keeps repeating itself? A cycle that no longer fits? Dolores said that the past doesn't need to be forgotten, only understood. When we accept our history without judgment, we free up energy to create the new. And that is exactly the call of this time, to close the old cycle with awareness and begin the new with intention. You are not alone in this process. Millions of souls are awakening at the same time, remembering that they are part of something greater. And each one of them, including yours, is indispensable to the harmony of the whole. Now, take a deep breath. Feel the air passing through your body and remember that the same energy that pulsates in the stars pulsates in you. You are part of the consciousness that creates worlds, and nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate you from that origin. Dolores Cannon is no longer among us in physical form, but her words continue to vibrate through those who remember her. And perhaps, at this very moment, she is watching you, smiling with that calm gaze that transcends dimensions, silently saying, "You finally remembered." If this video touched something within you, if it awakened a memory, a shiver, a desire to keep searching, then share that vibration. Like this video so that this message reaches more people. Comment on what you felt, even anonymously if you prefer, and subscribe to the channel. This is your space for remembrance, a meeting point for consciousnesses that are returning home. And remember, whenever you need to hear it again, you are not learning anything new, just remembering.